Since it's 12:15, let's get underway with our afternoon sessions. And I'm going to do a quick introduction of Dr. John Kepler, who is currently the tech training team leader at Stanford. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, an MBA, and a doctorate in business management. And he has taught at the University of Utah, University of California, and College of Notre Dame. He has also led the International Technology Training Program for the IEEE, the world's largest technical professional association. And I'm going to pass things over to John for your presentation on the Q&A for impact, the impact of COVID-19 on learning and technical training.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to this presentation. Certainly, all of us have been directly impacted by COVID-19, and since we are in an educational environment and our careers are closely linked to education, I thought it would be worthwhile for us to take a look at what some of the experts are saying and predicting for the future of our world in terms of education. Certainly the impact has been far-reaching and wide and quite profound, not only on education, but since we only have a brief time for our presentation this afternoon, I will focus our attention on various aspects of educational impacts. I'm going to begin the presentation actually with a video from the Wall Street Journal. And anytime Wall Street produces a video about something, you know that that's an important topic. So let's take a look at this video together, and then I will begin with my actual PowerPoint slides.
The coronavirus has upended the world of higher education. In March, students were abruptly sent home. Classes were moved online. Now, as campuses across the country sit empty, administrators are scrambling to prepare for what comes next.
In many ways, the attack that COVID represents to higher education is a really straightforward assault on the bottom line.
The financial challenges are severe. I mean, I won't kid you, they're profoundly challenging.
There will be more bankruptcies, more business failures, more need for federal and state bailouts.
The pandemic has thrown the budgets of public and private colleges into turmoil. Since the lockdowns went into effect, they have seen their revenues drop and their expenses climb.
I think, more than belt tightening, this may be something like reconstructive surgery, if not actually, thoracic surgery.
With all education now virtual, e-learning is having a moment. When students were sent home mid-semester, American higher ed began what was essentially a nationwide experiment. In the space of 3 weeks, all learning was moved from the classroom to the internet. This has accelerated the trend towards online education and raised more fundamental questions about the value of a college degree.
College students suing Drexel University, the University of Miami, and others saying online learning is no replacement for a bricks and mortar on-campus experience.
What will be the lasting legacy of COVID-19 for higher education? Could this virus lead to a wave of college and university closures? Will the classroom we once knew gradually return, or could COVID permanently transform how we learn?
Whoa! Hey, Brian.
To help answer these questions, I spoke to Brian Alexander, a higher education futurist. As his title suggests, Alexander spends a lot of time contemplating what might happen in the higher education space. In a passage included in his 2020 book, Alexander suggested the possibility of a global pandemic transforming the industry.
I wrote the chapter in 2018, 2019, and I'm afraid it is chillingly prescient.
But how do you imagine a post-COVID future when so little is known about COVID itself? With so much uncertainty surrounding the pandemic, Alexander believes it's impossible to divine any one outcome. Instead, he sees 3 potential paths for the future of higher education.
One is that we could be in the middle of a short plague, and that is something which burns out relatively quickly. That perhaps a month from now, we are very, very far down the downhill side, and that come August and September, we'll be in good shape, and colleges and universities can open their physical doors to welcome face-to-face students again. The second possibility is that the pandemic will extend through December into 2021. In that case, then we have to think about higher education being virtual throughout the entire fall semester.
Recently, the California State University system announced that it will be canceling most in-person classes in the fall and will instead hold them online. This is significant because the Cal State system is the largest four-year university system in the country. The system is also one of the most diverse in the country, with 1/3 of undergraduates the first in their families to attend college. One of those is Anna Ruth Bertolazzi, a senior at San Francisco State University.
As a single parent, my son, he's a 7th grader, soon now close to be an 8th grader. It was a challenge.
Like many students, one challenge Anna has faced are class disruptions due to a slow internet connection.
There are moments when if I ask a question to my Zoom class professor, my voice is not even projecting or it stops.
Students like Anna would also be impacted by Alexander's third forecast.
A third possibility is that instead of having a simple pandemic, short or long, that we'll have something more complicated with multiple waves. For academia, I dubbed this the toggle term. This is when a campus will have to switch back and forth between face-to-face instruction and wholly online instruction.
Each of these scenarios would be costly. Even in the best forecast, where the pandemic is shorter and campuses reopen in the fall, there's no guarantee that all students and faculty will return. That means smaller classes and less revenue for schools. If the fall semester is online, Alexander expects the financial hit to be even more severe, as more students demand tuition breaks.
We have about 4,400 colleges and universities in the U.S. all told, and I could see easily 10% staring into the abyss this time next year. What worries me are, first of all, private colleges and universities that, therefore lack any state support, but that are not the most highly ranked, the lower ranked and medium ranked ones.
Dominican University is a small private liberal arts college located in San Rafael, California.
Yeah, we know we're going to have some financial hits, so we know we'll have to make some adjustments to get there, but we know where we're headed, and we're really reasonably well positioned to manage this. The place where Dominican is not as well positioned, and it's true of many, many small colleges, is we don't have deep pockets. We have a really small endowment.
But small private schools aren't the only ones at risk. Some state universities are in trouble as well.
I'm also concerned about public university systems that are facing similar problems. For example, you think about Pennsylvania.
One of the public systems at risk is Pennsylvania's state system of higher education, which is made up of 14 state-owned colleges and universities.
The challenges of higher education, public higher education generally, they're pretty acutely concentrated here. Obviously, a historic pattern of declining public investment has forced universities to increase tuition and actually net average price overall. So those challenges sort of have combined in our system to produce a 20% enrollment decrease since 2010, between 2010 and 2019. And obviously, as our enrollments go down, we're an enrollment-driven industry, and as a consequence, our revenues have declined as well.
If there is one consensus in higher ed, it's that online education is here to stay, and that it will only grow in importance. One company that is uniquely positioned to understand this trend is Chegg. Chegg provides online services for about 60% of American college students.
When I went to college many, many years ago, my intro to business courses were 300-person lectures in a giant auditorium. Not only are those potentially dangerous right now, but the reality is those lend themselves very, very well to online learning.
Last semester, schools were forced online out of necessity. But the reality is, for many students, necessity may keep them there.
We have to imagine that many, many families are seeing their savings and investments put into chaos, those who have those. Some of them are being hit economically by unemployment or underemployment. Some of them, additionally, are being hit by disease.
Like a lot of things right now, what you're seeing is an acceleration. There's already been a movement of lots of people questioning the ROI of going in for a 4-year degree that all in may cost $250,000 or $300,000 for people while they're also not working and getting a job that entire time.
More students online means less revenue for schools, but Brian Alexander is optimistic that the industry will get creative and adapt to students' needs.
Well, if we're looking at the fall, and if either of my scenarios come to pass, either the toggle term or the long plague, and faculty and staff have to prepare for a full semester online, now we have months, not weeks. We have months to plan, prepare, shape, and hone the experience.
Well, the video has certainly given us some food for thought, and I would like to share with you a little bit more information about what other experts are saying and some of the other impacts that are probably going to influence the world of education. So let me now switch over to the PowerPoint. And let's do that. All right. Well, one of the key questions that we really need to answer is, will this virus stay, and how long will it stay with us? There's no doubt about the impact, and we are all really sort of dealing with it as time progresses, and no one quite knows to 100% degree of certainty what all the outcomes will be. But one of the key questions that we've been looking at is, will this thing be around for a while? Unfortunately, the experts are saying yes. And if that's the case, we are going to find that it will be a little bit more difficult than some people think to get rid of it. And also, the vaccine may not really provide a panacea if we do arrive at one. Experts feel that it took quite a bit of time to get a vaccine for smallpox, and that was a disease that it was easy to see when someone was infected, but with COVID, it's very difficult to detect who has it and who doesn't, and so the spread continues, and the problems are likely to be with us for quite a bit of time. So, unfortunately, the impact is going to be profound and long-lasting. Now, the impact is not only on education, as I mentioned earlier. We are seeing some major paradigm shifts in the business world, in how people conduct business, and in the workplace environment itself. And consequently, this is going to require a new way of thinking about the world that we live in. And naturally, education is a big part of that world. And we're going to find that what was once acceptable in any environment in the past is not going to be tolerated in the future, simply because it may not be safe. What was once successful will also not continue to be successful in the future. The definition of success is going to be completely revamped and revisited. Now, the workplace shift that we have seen is also having an impact on training, and in particular, technical training. As more people start working from home, and we've seen sort of an increase in that trend even prior to COVID, and that trend is likely to continue post-COVID. The questions of education and training are going to also need to accommodate that shift in the workplace. Just another interesting statistic, Zoom usage in December of 2019 was about 10 million, and in April of 2020, just a month or so ago, it jumped to 300 million. So you can see the dramatic impact of the change of people working from home. Companies like Facebook and Salesforce and Twitter are already considering making their work from home policies permanent for a good percentage of their employees. The other important thing that we need to keep in mind, the high unemployment rate that has been experienced during this period, and that many of those jobs may not necessarily be coming back, and experts are warning that about 40% of them will not be available post-COVID. So our educational model in the past was really heavily focused on in-person training and education, and now it's going to a virtual and an online format. Most of our big school systems didn't have any sort of backup. This was true also of K through 12. This is another thing that has to really change, and we're going to see that many educational institutions and schools are going to have to develop some sort of a technical virtual backup for their educational systems. A lot of the deficiencies in the system have also been exposed because of COVID, and so the systems will have to be redesigned to address some of those deficiencies. And the old traditional approach of sort of one size fits all is not going to be a feasible or a working model, and this is going to be especially true for K through 12. The 21st century, as we move into it, is going to definitely need technology and the internet. And technical training and technical knowledge is going to be gaining momentum, and the demand for it is going to increase. The age of the textbook as the primary tool for an educator is really over. We're going to be looking at an assortment of different tools and methods for students to use for their learning. In addition, we are going to have to overcome what's described as the digital divide for students who really don't have access to technology and need to have that access. This is one of the biggest weaknesses that COVID has exposed. And so one of the major shifts we're going to find in both K-12, higher education, and workforce learning is the importance of making technology more accessible, both for students and for all employees in the workforce. Boston, for instance, the school district there has already bought and distributed about 20,000 Chromebooks and creating hotspots all around the city in Boston where children and their families can go to get internet access. So we are already seeing some rapid responses to this particular need. Now, some of the things that sort of have been exasperated in higher education and will continue to leave an impact on universities, the impact of travel and, of course, international students on a campus. Schools that are heavily dependent on international students and don't have an adequate online strategy are certainly going to be confronting some significant problems. College admissions are also another important issue that is being re-examined. We know that this is the first year ever where, in fact, colleges are not going to be taking into account SAT scores for undergraduate admissions. So there is a whole new rethinking of admission criteria and what we should look at. And it's sort of another interesting dynamic going on in the world of education. It is really crucial to understand the impact of the loss of international student and the revenue for some schools. That may actually impact their survival. It'll also be interesting how the government rises to the challenge, whether they will, in fact, come in to support various state educational institutions or not. Now, if we switch gears a little bit to the workforce, many organizations have canceled face-to-face training sessions, and now they're going to have to rely on online training. We're going to talk a little bit also about the tools that they're going to have to use for this training. And recruiters will not be able to come to campuses to actually recruit, again, for health reasons and fear of contagion. Onboarding is going to become more of a little bit more of a challenging task for some employers as new employees come on board and they're not able to travel, meet with others, and the onboarding process has to be done remotely. Everyone is really being forced to make hard decisions on what is truly mission critical and what alternatives are available to sort of address things that are in fact mission critical. We're going to see also an increase in the number of online and virtual boot camps that try to boost training of for boarding of new employees and also for upgrading employee skills. We're also probably going to see an increase in what in the income share agreement training models where They will not charge you tuition upfront. Some institution or some businesses, training enterprises do that. They don't take any tuition upfront, but once you find a job, you pay them back for the education that you've received. We're also going to see probably a significant increase in certification programs and the importance of competency assessments to ensure that people that are being hired actually have the required skills for the jobs that they are going to be doing. Since there's going to be less and less of reliance on a direct personal interview, this is going to be more and more important to take a look at what certifications an individual has. Now, we're going to have to be thinking also about new techniques, new approaches for learning, and specifically for technical training in helping people acquire new technical skills. Augmented reality and virtual reality are going to be instrumental in this arena. In sessions where, for instance, we might have had a person-to-person training to demonstrate something, a lot of these demonstrations are going to move to a virtual world, and we're going to use virtual reality technology to accommodate that. So we anticipate an extensive growth in AR, VR educational tools in the next couple of years. We're also going to see enhanced AI, artificial intelligence-based interactive learning, basically where the learning begins to respond to the proficiency level of the learner, online or through asynchronous e-learning. The model here is if someone still has a weakness in a particular area, the learning platform will continue to help train them and bring up their skill level in that particular domain before they move on to another area and start giving them additional information. We're also going to see a new evolution of training simulations, where in fact there's going to be some interaction between the trainee and the course itself. And they're going to have to be making decisions and responding to decision tree models within the learning process. A lot of this is really going to evolve and develop quite a bit in the years to come. There's probably a lot more that is going to happen, and this was just a little bit of food for thought and sharing with you what some of the experts are forecasting for the world of education. And now I would like to get some of your thoughts and sort of what some of you are predicting in this dynamic and rapidly changing world of ours. Any questions, Don?
Thank you very much, John. And we have one question in so far, but if anybody else has any questions or any thoughts that you want to strike up a conversation during this time, our next session actually doesn't start until 1 o'clock. And so we're going to have this time for the Q&A. And the question we have so far is from Svetlana, who says, I read one study description that the early use of aspirin in COVID-19 patients, which has the effects of inhibiting virus replication, anti-platelet aggregation, anti-inflammatory, and anti-lung injury, is expected to reduce the incidence of severe and critical patients, shorten the length of hospital duration, and reduce the incidence of cardiovascular complications. And the question is more of a, how far is the progress to find the right medication for COVID-19? And what are your thoughts on that?
That is, of course, an excellent question. I wish I was better qualified to answer it. I've never had any presidential training, so I don't venture into medical arenas when I really have no experience and no knowledge in that realm or that domain. All I can say to you is I pray, and I am very optimistic and hopeful that we will find a way to conquer this virus, whether it's through treatment or whether through a potent vaccine, whatever it may be. I certainly look forward to it. Unfortunately, so far, we have not seen anything that anyone can point to with a high degree of certainty and say, this is it, we found the solution, and we're out of the woods. So I hope that what you've read is accurate and is putting us on the path towards a better treatment or cure. But again, I regret that I really am in no position to give you a definitive answer other than to say, I hope that that is true.
Okay, another question that came up is, what are your thoughts on, like, what are there any validated best practices for online education that you'd like to share?
There are certainly lots and lots of validated practices actually for improving online, and I may mention to you that in fact we are working on developing a course to address that very topic, which we will feature I believe later this summer. Mm-hmm. But to quickly give you a synopsis of some of the things that really help online training, first and foremost is to continue with a high level of engagement with the audience, not to just have a talking head or just an abstract presentation that doesn't engage the learner. It is very, very important to maintain some sort of level of interaction and engagement with your audience. That's tip number one. Tip number two is to use a blend of media, not to rely on strictly PowerPoints or just graphics, to really have a blend of things to maintain the learner's interest and to get them sort of, again, engaged and intrigued by the presentation. And in addition to that, one other thing that I would add is whatever content you've developed or whatever material needs to be a work in progress. You need to continually be working on improving that material because things are rapidly changing and people always want to get a state-of-the-art knowledge and education about any particular subject. Those are three of the key highlights which I would share with you. There's certainly a lot more in terms of detail, and I would invite you to attend one of our sessions where we delve into that topic in greater depth.
Yeah, Creed actually posted the link to the sessions coming up, or a couple of sessions are coming up this summer, including the one for the 5 key ingredients for designing engaging e-learning courses that you're teaching, as well as the other class on combining PowerPoint and Camtasia for instructional videos, which is very important in this day and age.
I am glad that Creed's on it.
Other questions, as we actually have a lot of requests for people who are looking for a video of this session or a copy of the video that you have. So we'll work with you afterwards on getting the video out if we can share with those who are requesting it.
Certainly. As an educator at heart, I'm always willing to share knowledge and information. So happy to share that video with anyone who's interested.
There is about 12 more questions actually that came up in the Q&A. Right. One of the ones that came up was, does Stanford have resources to assist in the development of online learning and training?
Stanford has a plethora of resources. I won't speak for all the resources, even though I know that there are tons of them around campus, but I will share with you a little bit about Tech Training's resources. We have an instructional design team, and we support a lot of the e-learning efforts on campus, and we're happy to lend a hand in a number of different ways to help you get started, to help do a little bit of training for your team, to actually develop an actual course for you. So we really provide a full service support in that arena.
Okay, somebody had mentioned here about their father, 81-year-old father who teaches backflow, and of course with now being able to do all this training remote, he's upset that he can't teach anymore. And they've tried to ask him to use Zoom, but needs more hands-on to teach the instrument. So this is another person who will, the slides from today's session could be helpful to help get their instructor on board.
Now, one of the things that I will mention, there are also technologies now available if there are things that will help demonstrate, for instance, if there are certain things where I have to show the manipulation with my hands, I can use a special type of camera that will focus on my hand to show the technique, and these cameras are a little bit more expensive than a tiny little webcam, but they are available. So there are tools also to help support different types of training that may require manual demonstrations of techniques.
Okay, so we answered questions about the resources for best practices for online education. Question that came up was, do you think learning about data science, machine learning, programming, or any related field would be beneficial for people in any profession now that the world is moving more towards those areas and becoming more in demand?
That's an excellent question, and the short answer to it is absolutely yes. I was at a presentation recently at a conference, and the keynote speaker identified data as the oil of the future, meaning that this is the arena where fortunes are going to be made. The sooner you are able to understand, appreciate, and have the knowledge and skill to work with data and analyze, use predictive analytics, and sort of apply a new frame of mind and thinking to the data that you have, the greater the likelihood you are going to become far more valuable in your particular profession. So I would encourage everyone to learn as much as they can about the arena of data science and also the tools that are used in that field. And certainly, I don't want to put another plug here, but we have been trying to offer a number of courses in that domain.
Yes, and actually those classes can all be found at techtraining.stanford.edu or by going to itsupcoming.stanford.edu. Thank you very much. Next question. Any changes in curriculum / modules changes? Can you discuss reliability and validity of testing tools in this new online learning environment? Will there be a shift away from testing and evaluation and measurement?
Well, that's also an interesting and a very good question, by the way. And the answer to that is it's going to vary quite a bit depending on the nature of the topic and the nature of the field that you are looking at. So take, for instance, software, and let's take coding in software. There have been a lot of very interesting developments in assessment of coding capability and the ability to write code, and the developments have been all using AI. CMU, Carnegie Mellon University, has developed a very interesting assessment tool that is completely run by AI to evaluate, to give an individual certain exercises to write code or to change code, and then it evaluates how well they did it and gives them a report and an assessment on their performance. So that is certainly, again, an application of technology in the area of assessment that really has no human bias whatsoever. So it really all depends, and we are seeing all kinds of interesting ways to assess and measure skill and competency in a variety of different fields. If we look at, for instance, business management, as I mentioned in the presentation, you're going to see a lot of new simulations on the market where you may interact with the simulation and you're going to have to be making decisions throughout the simulation. Those decisions can then be evaluated and you can get an assessment of your proficiency in those decisions and the decisions that you've made.
Great, thank you. Next question is, actually we have a couple of Zoom related questions here. And the first one is, there are concerns about Zoom and security issues because their servers are overseas. Do you see Zoom security issues affecting online training and business meetings?
Certainly, if the type of training is of a nature that is high security, or if in fact it can be recorded by someone else and put on the black market and so on, that would be a definite concern. I do know that Zoom is really trying to work on mitigating some of those issues, and they have made some strides in that realm, and I hope that they will continue to do so. But by all means, yes, that would be the security issue continues to be relevant and one of concern.
And the other question is, for your Zoom expertise. That video you showed at the beginning of the session, how did you share that video so smoothly in Zoom? Every time they try it, it always comes up very choppy. Can you give us some hints on how to make that video run so smoothly in Zoom?
The only thing I can say is experience. I've been doing this for some time, and this would be something I would have to demonstrate for you in person, and I'm happy to do that if you are interested in a sidebar and show you how we can do it. But it's not that difficult.
Is that the way where when sharing your screen, there's a button there for making the video run smoothly in Zoom, or was okay?
Yes, there is a technique to doing it properly.
So if anybody's interested in learning more about that, we also offer Zoom training sessions through Technology Training, or you can always send us an email, techtraining@stanford.edu for any questions you have about that, and we'd be happy to help you to help make your meetings or your Zooms, or I should say videos running in Zoom, run more smoothly. One more question for you.
Sure.
And this is one on COVID-19 is the one current pandemic we're dealing with. We can't assume that once this has been addressed, others aren't lurking. Do you envision this is the start of a new normal and former methods of education and gatherings are to become obsolete?
Unfortunately, it's not just my own vision, but there are a lot of other futurists and experts that share that opinion. They anticipate that, one, because of the environmental changes that the planet is experiencing, climate change, that this is the beginning of a new dynamic that we are likely to see repeat again. Unfortunately, I wish I had better news, but that is sort of what the experts, again, are anticipating.
Okay, so those are all the questions I've got so far. And we have one more question that came up here. As most K-12 regular school teachers are still pivoting to online teaching, do you see more families opting for established online schools? As a parent, the last months have been mainly quote-unquote busy work.
I think we are going to see some dramatic changes in the K-12 model. There's been talk about going back to the old single schoolroom educational model, where you have a very limited number of students that may not necessarily be all within the same grade, and to sort of reconfigure school arrangements. The cookie cutter model that has been implemented for a lot of schools over the past few decades is certainly being reshaped, and there's a lot of rethinking of what's to come. To be honest with you, I really don't know what the eventual outcome will be, but what I can tell you is there are a lot of good minds that are thinking about that, and there are a lot of ideas that are being tossed around, and it's likely to be some hybrid of an in-class model and a virtual component supported by technology.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I've seen so far inside the chat and the Q&A. One more call out. Any questions from any of the attendees here today? Okay, we'll leave the chat open, of course, and the Q&A for any questions you may have moving forward. John will actually be back after this next session talking about Project Management 2020. And that session, if you're interested in joining that one, will start at 1:45. Our next session starts in 6 minutes. And this is actually going to be called Push the Accelerator in Google Drive. This is a session I'll be conducting from 1 until 1:30. And then we'll have the Q&A from 1:30 to 1:40 before we prep for John's next session. So we still have another 6 minutes before the next session begins. And want to make sure that those who are interested in joining the session at 1 p.m. are able to join us, and we start on time at 1 p.m. So we'll take another quick break and then get back underway at 1 p.m. But please, if you do have any further questions, type them into the chat, type them into the Q&A, and we will be happy to help answer them for you. If you have any questions for the project management or for the Google Drive session that's coming up, feel free to type them in as well. And we'll just make sure we get to them before the end of the session today. And the presenter's name, well, that was Dr. John Kepler, who just presented the session on the impact of COVID-19 on learning and technical training. And my name is Don Cameron. I'll be the instructor for the next session on Push the Accelerator in Google Drive. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up for the session at 1 p.m., but please continue to ask any questions inside of the chat or the Q&A.